Hey, and welcome back to another couples episode of the Growing Pain podcast. I'm your host, Alyson Caffrey, and today I sit down with Kyle and Sara Wester. I am so excited to bring this incredible couple to you guys. So, Kyle is a licensed professional counselor and parenting coach. He was an elementary school counselor for 7 years. He's worked with children for over 20 years. He and his wife, Sara, love being parents to three amazing kids, raising from 8 to 14 years old. Together, they started a counseling and coaching business called The Art of Raising Humans. And they also produce and host a weekly podcast entitled The Art of Raising Humans. They really go super deep into creating powerful relationships, partnerships, resolving conflict within your partnership and in your family. This is going to be really jam packed with any one of you guys who is really thinking through how you guys are approaching parenting as a couple. It'll also, I think, be really fruitful for any of the moms listening here that have partnerships in business. A lot of the things that they were talking about on the show, I actually found directly translated to a lot of the work that I've done at Operations Agency, talking between partners, CEO, COO relationship. So if that feels like you, definitely get cozy and definitely be excited to hear from Kyle and Sara. This was an incredible conversation, and I will see you guys inside. Kyle and Sara, welcome. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you, Alyson. Yeah, we're excited to be on.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So we were just shooting the breeze before we pressed record, and I was joking, like we should have probably just hit record as soon as we started talking, because immediately, there's this overwhelming value and overwhelming expertise that like oozes out of you guys. And I don't know if you see it, but I experience it. And I'm really excited for our listeners today to get to know you guys, get to know some of the systems that you've put together to parent more beautifully, to run your business more beautifully, to be connected as a couple. But let's like zoom out and go 30,000 feet here. Tell us a little bit about your business and the family that you guys have at home.
Well, first, if I could start out, Sara and I we actually met on a trip to Siberia together. And there, I was the team leader of this team. We were doing some work in orphanages and things like that. And Sara was on the team. And very quickly, I was like, she is an asset. Like, she's amazing. And lots of times, conflicts that arose, Alyson, on the team, I had no idea how to handle them. Like, I was like a 22-year-old guy who was not very skilled at doing that because my parents didn't show it in their marriage or how to really resolve conflict in a healthy way. But Sara would have these great ideas and be like, why don't you try this or try that? And I would try it almost like not believing it was going to work. And then it would just be awesome. And then I would get all the credit, which felt kind of bad, but they were like, what an amazing leader he is. And so I would be like on the plane ride from Moscow to Siberia, or that we went to two different regions in Siberia. I'd just be picking her brain because we had our seats were right next to each other because both of our last names start with W. So I would just be picking her brain. So that's where I started to get the idea that maybe I would love to marry her and then be able to do life with her. And that led us into both pursuing a master's degree in counseling. So we both went and got our master's degrees in counseling together. And that was awesome, Alyson. It was so much fun going to class every day with her. It was like those 3.5 years were so busy, but they were so exciting because we were just having these conversations. We were growing as people.
Yeah, we got to do a lot of growing together and exploring ideas and thoughts and conflicts and things.
But even then, we never dreamed 22 years later, we've been married 22 years, that we'd be where we are now, where we have this business, where now we're actually living out that dream. And that the dream started back then where we were seeing these parents, seeing these couples whose marriages were falling apart. The family life was going crazy. And we had insight into it, partly because of our training, but also because of the work we were doing with kids and our individual jobs. And we were like, man, that'd be so awesome if we could work together and just help families in Tulsa first. But then what if we could help families around the world? That would be really awesome. And so it's been really cool. As long as we kept that dream and that vision of I'm a better human with you than without you, no matter what we're doing, as long as we've kept that as a goal, we've started to see the dreams start to grow and become reality.
That's incredible. And over the time of building these dreams, you guys had a couple kids, right?
We did.
Yeah, we have 3 kids. We have a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And that was really, we had done so much together. We had gone through our grad school, masters, all that licensing stuff, and our kids come along, and we had both been working with kids for so long But it was real eye-opening how walking that journey together, it added a whole new layer, whole new set of challenges, things that we didn't realize were under the surface. It's nothing like parenting to make all that bubble up.
Yeah. And we really thought, well, we've already done a whole like master's degree. We did a whole
Yeah.
semester on conflict resolution. This should be easy. But then once we had the kids, it was like, wow, we actually, I thought we were on the same side. I thought we were on the same team, but we were coming from two totally different perspectives. And that was creating a whole new conflict that we see happen a lot. And I'm sure you do too, Alyson, in families where Sara had one vision of what raising kids looked like, and I had a completely different vision. And we was starting to where we were like butting heads a lot. And it was really hurting our marriage. And too often, the families that we get a chance to coach and help, you see that happening where they came together, they were in love, they had a dream of building a family. And then the result of that is kids come into the fray. But then within like 8 to 10 years, they're coming to me or to Sara and they're saying, hey, we're going to get a divorce. And I want you to tell these kids it's not their fault. And I'll agree with it. It isn't their fault. But when I talk to the kids, it seems like it is, because to them, they've heard a lot of arguing about them, that it seems like the story was mom and dad were doing great. And then the kids came along, and then all of that conflict started to push them further and further apart.
Well, let's talk about this maybe like in a timeline or tactically, because I think there are parents who feel like they've got a certain amount of life figured out and then they decide to grow a family. Then that's right. They start to misalign is maybe what the term I'll use. They feel misaligned. They don't have the opportunity to kind of splice out that time and get on the same page. And it's not just about parenting, right? I'm imagining that this is true. It's about how we expect our relationship to look in the phase of parenting, and then layer a business on top of that and all the different things. So are there like some key conversations or alignments that couples can have either pre-parenting, or if they feel like, if somebody's listening and they're like in the thick of, we feel misaligned, we're totally on different pages, like what might the start of that conversation look like?
You want to dive in that one?
I could. You go ahead. Yeah. You're the one who helped me get there.
I think it's sort of one of those things where we're like, well, wait a second. We thought we were together and we're finding all these places we're not together. And then at the same time, we're also running a business together, right? So we have layers to this. And I think the first thing was just our view on conflict. That conflict was normal and that it wasn't something to be avoided. So our first thing was just we had to agree that conflict was something that could bring us together. It didn't have to be something that tore us apart. And we had to look at how we do conflict very different.
Very differently. Alyson.
Yeah, I would like to run for the hills. He wants to come in all ready to duke it out.
I'm ready to go. Let's do this.
And so our first big hours long conflict, I was in tears. He's like, yes, this is awesome. Look at this.
Like, we're really getting somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And so just the coming of, okay, what do we think about conflict and how are we going to do conflict? You know, how can we come together on this and hear each other and make it something that brings us closer together, not further apart? Because conflict can do either one. And it's really about how you're going to do the conflict. So I think that to me was the starting point, that we were going to go into these moments, not away from these moments. This is how we're going to go into these moments. This is how we can make it something that's productive. And it doesn't matter if it's for our business, for our marriage, for our children, whatever the topic was, we're going to come together in this way and be able to come out closer together because of it.
Well, and Alyson, the way I word it when I'm coaching parents is just, I want them to see conflict as an opportunity. And for many people, it's been an opportunity to isolate, to pull away, to push each other further apart. But conflict is inherently an opportunity to actually grow. We're intimate and closer together. I mean, think about even in marriage terms. What actually brought us together wasn't that we were the same. It was actually like when we were dating, the way she did things was so different than me. It was super endearing. It was super cute. I was like, you see it how? Oh my gosh, you're so interesting. And like a lot of those differences are actually the thing that made me want to pull closer to her. But then as we're doing marriage together and doing parenting, then all of a sudden you see some of these conflicts aren't being resolved well. And it's actually pushing us further away. All of a sudden now I'm judging her, I'm criticizing her. I'm thinking the way she does it is dumb or weird or something like that. And that's what then makes the conversations a lot harder, because pretty soon we get so far apart, we're not even wanting to connect because it's not even fun to be with each other. And then the kids see that, and then the kids start doing that with each other, with their siblings. And that's where the whole kind of like, it becomes very overwhelming in a family when we don't see conflict as an opportunity to grow closer.
I guess think about this. So, say, for example, I have a disagreement with my husband on something, how we're handling something with the kids. Something that's top of mind right now is our one son. He gets up a lot in the middle of the night
Oh, yes.
because he heard a train super loudly while we were on vacation. And there's a train like not close, but you can still hear the horn. And he gets super scared by it in the middle of the night whenever he hears it. And so he'll wake up crying. And Steve and me, we healthily, I think, disagree on how we might handle that situation. So, how would Steve and I have healthy conflict around this discussion?
What comes to mind are a few things that we use. First off, his perspective is valid just like my perspective is valid, right? Start from that place. That's a small thing. If you kind of zoom out, anytime anything comes up like that, it's what are your belief systems? How we're, your brain wiring, how we were raised and how we are as a person, how we show up in the world. The glasses I'm looking through to determine a situation or make meaning of the event, right?
It almost in light of that, Sarah, what I'd say, like in that moment, Alyson, if you and Steve is your husband, right? Right.
Yeah.
And so if you and Steve are talking, I would be curious as to what is the story Steve's telling himself about that. Right. And then what is Alyson's story that she's telling? Because really that's the conflict. The conflict is we're just both drawing different conclusions about this moment. If you added a third or fourth person, they might draw different conclusions too. Right. And so
Totally.
I love what Sarah's saying, that's what we had to do a lot of that.
Yeah. It's
Of
like, how am
being
I wired?
curious.
How am I
Yeah, like,
trained? What's my belief system to look at this? And a lot of that even comes from our childhood. Maybe we were used to situations like that. This is what our dad did,
yeah.
or what our mom did.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
so,
Like you can't let the kid manipulate you. You've got to
Yeah.
be hard on this. Like,
Right.
Don't get up. Right. If you those kind of things are coming from childhood programming, right? Whereas someone else like Sarah would be like, the kid's just wanting our help. Like this will pass if we just help it. Oh no, you're training the kid to now do this every night. And like so both of you are coming from these different viewpoints. And like a symbol I like to use too, Alice, is I love to use, if people can see on video, I like using this kind of closed hand versus open hand model. And like what we did early on when we were really butting heads was a good picture. We were both coming with closed hand, like these stories that were fixed. And so like I knew I could read my kid's mind. I knew why the kid was getting up at night. And then Sarah was like, well, maybe, like I could feel Sarah's hand was kind of opening up. Like maybe it's not that. And I'd be like, no, it is that. And so through this conversation, what Sarah's describing here is the goal is eventually to help you and your husband get to where you both have open hands. And neither one of us actually totally knows what's happening. We're both just guessing. And those are coming from our separate belief systems. But then we want to do this. We want to bring those hands together and to be able to co-create how we as a couple want to approach this moment.
I like the visual. I think that's super helpful. Do you guys find that typically like one member of the partnership is more in tune with their own stories or more willing to like go back, and another one maybe a little bit more closed more often?
No, you're describing why I say Sarah was so helpful to me. And a lot of the reason why she was so helpful, Alyson, was typically that one who's more in tune with that story is they just are really better at empathizing and like modeling curiosity and receptiveness, right? This openness.
Yeah.
And so like I was coming in 100% believing I was right. And I thought the goal in the conversation was to win, was to show her that she was wrong, right? And so that was a problem. And what I loved about Sarah is Sarah was like, I'm not here to win. I'm not trying to beat you. Like we're on the same team. So if you want to do like an argument where we try to out-logic each other, out-reason each other, that's not my goal. My goal is to understand you, Kyle. I'm really wanting to understand why you see it that way. And so she was very patient in asking me these empathetic questions, which then helped me begin to open up my own hand and go, why do I think I'm so right on this? And then in that, it led us to the goal of these conflicts, which is the intimacy. We drew closer, but understanding. Like really that's at the core of all healthy communication. Is the goal is not to win or be right or to just pacify somebody's anger. It is to understand each other better. And that's how we knew in those moments with those late night things, that was success to us. Is like, man, our kids late night, like your son waking up, this is an opportunity that your son is giving you to actually grow closer together and be more intimate. And if your son didn't do that, you would never get that opportunity.
I love that reframe as like conflict is an opportunity or challenges are opportunities. I want to talk about like meeting these conflicts and meeting these challenges. You talked about how complementary your skill sets are, right? The yin and the yang, for lack of a better term, right? I think how can we balance our unique skill sets and also still be on the same page? I think specifically like talking to our kids. So, for example, like it's super important to present a united front. And I also still want them to understand that like we are still individual people. Like
Yes.
mom has
Yes.
specific skills
Definitely.
and dad has specific skills. And like if you need dad to like build a killer Lego set, like that's the person to go to, like for sure not mom, like not gonna have fun, not gonna be able to do it. And so how do we like keep those nuances forefront, but also still like almost at the core be united on things with the kids?
I love that too, because you'll often see sometimes in relationships the best, we're doing our best. So one person almost fades into the background as the other person
Yeah.
The more
winds up
dominant
being the
one.
one to take over. And you both have yours, and you come to a place where, okay, we both have our skill sets. We both have our unique personalities, our own backgrounds. And it takes intentionality. You have to be very intentional. We had to get together and have lots of conversations. This isn't just a one-time thing, but we check in because another event happens and you're like,
Daily.
wait a
Yes.
second.
Yeah.
So we have regular conversations to say, how did you view that? We need to understand that. And then we just learned to have conversations about, okay, this is what I can bring. The Lego's a good example, like, okay, I'm not the Lego person. You're the Lego person. I am really good in these situations. I feel equipped. I can rise up to it. And so I like the word tag team. We often do that. We tag each other in. And it can be in moments of conflict. I might feel like, okay, I'm spent here. I need to tag out. I need to tag you in. Or it can be in little things of, hey, you're better at math than I am. So can you take care of this? But we have to know each other well enough to know, here you are and here I am. And here's my struggles. Here's your struggles. And so we can help each other out in those moments. But that's through a lot of conversation. That's through a lot of being able to trust each other to hold those pieces, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of, we can really team up on this.
Yeah.
But that's what we want. We want a great, strong team, because then as our kids age, they're part of that team with their strengths and their weaknesses. And we can come to each other and use each other and build each other up to be a stronger family.
Yeah. To me, that ties in, Alyson, to another big idea. Not only is conflict an opportunity, but I've got to believe that my spouse is for me, right? Like that she is on my side. And it doesn't mean she's going to agree with everything I do or she doesn't have to back up and cheer me on all the time by everything I'm doing. There might be times she disagrees or doesn't even like what I'm doing. But the point is, she is on my side. We are on the same team. What is that team? Well, that team is our whole family, that we all want to have a healthy, thriving family. So what that might look like is Sarah, we homeschool our kids as well. So they're actually upstairs doing school right now. But maybe my oldest, Abby, who's got these big emotions. And sometimes she can be doing algebra and be getting so mad. And I might be downstairs doing some work, and maybe her and Sarah are working through it, and Sarah's kind of spent. I might get a text from Sarah and say, hey, could you please talk to Abby and help her? And so I'll just say, hey, Abby, hey, come on down. And I'll hear Abby coming down real mad down the stairs. And what Abby loves about her relationship with me is where mom is she's so nurturing, so empathetic, so just soft. Like you just want to cuddle up with her, right? When Abby's really mad and she needs to know her parent can handle her mad, she wants to bring it to me. So she'd be like, okay, I can go and just let dad know how mad I am. And dad isn't gonna get his feelings hurt. So like she'll come down and I'll say, you look like you're really mad. You want to tell me how mad you are? Just like go into it. And I might even do, this may sound silly, I might even say, looks like you really got some energy you want to get. You know what? If you want to hit me in the arm, just do it 3 times. Just really good. Just take 3 good hits to the arm. And she goes, are you serious? Can I hit you in the arm? You can hit me in the arm. It does not hurt me.
And pretty soon she's laughing.
Yes. And then she's laughing. And
Oh
then
my gosh.
and then
turns play.
and then I'm hugging her and she's crying. And then I say, hey, why don't you go back up there and fix that thing with mom? And she goes up there and does it. Right. But that's an example of how I know what Sarah's really good at. And it's not what I'm really good at. And that's actually a strength. Whereas at times, what you'll find, I'm sure couples who are listening to this, is that very thing that makes her so unique from me and makes our marriage work so well. If we're not connected, if we're not enjoying each other, all that stuff is going to be super annoying to me. It's going to be super frustrating. I'm going to dislike how she does not do it the way I do it. I'm very decisive. She takes her time to make decisions. And in good times, when we're really connected, I find that cute and adorable, like how hard it is for her to make a decision. But in times where I'm like, I want a decision now, and she's taking a long time, then I can get critical and judgmental of it. And you see how then I'm using the conflict as a way to push her away from me, as opposed to in the other example, I'm drawing closer to her and saying, I'm so glad you're not me. The kids need 2 of us, not just 1 of us.
And I'd add where that works is because we have the same goal. So we sat down together and we invite our kids into this. What's our goal? What kind of family are we? What's our goal with our relationship with our kids? So he can approach it with his style and I can approach it with my style because we have the same goal. We've agreed to these same things of where we're going, because it would be a big problem if he was going one direction, I was going another.
Totally. Yep.
So the fact that we have sat down, we've done that together, then we can use the strengths of each other to get us down that road.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk to me about goal setting. I think that's a really important caveat there, Sarah, in terms of like shared vision, aligned values, aligned direction. I think that like when we come from that place as a couple and even as a family, so I'm interested to hear how you guys loop your kids into some of these conversations. Mine are little, so like I'm always excited about the prospect in, you know, later years with the kids and like getting them involved in these types of conversations. And I think that's where that shared vision and then additional uniqueness of the individual, right, expands out to the kids and they can feel safe to express who they are individually and all that sort of stuff. But how do you guys currently tackle goal setting? And I know we're like almost at the first of the year here. I think a really timely conversation for families as they enter into 25, you know, how they can kind of approach that.
Well, that's where we do see growing a family no different than growing a business. That in order to be a successful business owner, we've got to have a dream and know where we're going. And most adults get that. Most adults go, oh yeah, and the work I work for, we have a mission statement. We've got a dream. But most of them don't have that for their family. And so what ends up happening, just like what happens in a business that doesn't have a mission statement or a dream, is we just become reactionary. We're constantly reacting to the crises of the moment. And then what we end up doing inevitably is we just create what we came from, because we have no concept of where we're going. So a big part of us being able to create that unified vision, dream, and goal was to first unpack where we came from. It was to sit down and be like, this is what I liked about what my parents did, and I did not like this. And she was able to say the same thing. So it's kind of like we both took out our toolboxes from our childhood and we just started going through it and being like, I don't want to carry this. I don't want this. And then we like, well, let's create our own toolbox. So we get our own toolbox and we start throwing the ones that we liked, that we both mutually agreed upon. And then we're like, okay, now what does it look like? What do I hope the kids say about our family when they leave the house at 18? You know, when they look back and say, man, our family was this. And so that kind of started like, we really got to start articulating that. And at first, just simple things like we want our kids to know that love never fails. It will always be better than fear. You know, so that's okay. That's going to be a big one. So that really changes a lot about how we're going to approach situations in our home, is we don't think fear is a helpful tool in regards to developing healthy humans. Okay. So we're always going to seek that. Okay. Conflict is always an opportunity. Okay, for us to grow closer together or push each other further away. Okay, how do we do that? How are we modeling that in our marriage, and how we do that with the kids, right? So those kind of ideas started to help us get an imagination of what our family could look like down the road, no different than what does it look like for our business to be successful 10 years from now, right? And that just seems like a natural thing you would do in the business, but we had never, ever thought of doing it in these kind of family terms, because our families never really did that. They didn't have these
I
kind of
don't know if,
discussions.
I don't know if anyone did that then. We asked very specific questions. What is the role of dad? What is the role of mom?
Mhm.
How were those in our family? And what do we want that to look like now for us? What did it look like as a kid? How does nurturing happen? How does conflict happen? We got into the nitty gritty of just what was it and what do we want to create?
Yeah.
And I think being very specific helped, because I think we'd all say, "Oh, well, I want my child to be confident." But you unpack that a little bit. What does that mean? What did that look like in my home? All the nuances, and you unpack it. You have conversations, and we scheduled them, and we invite our children into it by having the
Mhm.
conversations with them. Now we sit down. We actually recently did this
Yep. Yep.
at the beginning of the year. We always do it, but we start with, what are we as a family? Who do we want to be known as? And we have those conversations, and we revisit it. We revisit what values do we have? And so it's something we have scheduled in, and we kind of play around with it. We tweak it, we change it. We just recently made it weekly, and it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
before.
yeah. Kind of a weekly meeting we want to
Yeah.
do to follow the kids. And I'll even point out a good example that happens in a lot of homes. Listeners could relate to this. And this is something we had never talked about, but it came out about 3 or 4 months ago. Is there was a moment where Sarah was asking the kids to do something and they weren't doing it quick enough. And then I was in this place of like, I was getting tired of her hearing her ask it, right? So then I got mad and I was like, kids, get this done. I came out like this big monster came out, and then the kids got it done. And then I was like all mad. And what I was mad about was I felt like Sarah was trying to be good cop and was trying to make me bad cop, right? And then when Sarah and I had that follow-up conversation to use this opportunity as a way to grow closer, Sarah was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like we never had that in my home. We never had a good cop. But in my favorite restaurant, my mom was definitely the good cop and my dad was the bad cop. And as I was able to like unpack that story with her, it was like she was now forcing me to become like my dad and forcing me to be this person I didn't want to become. And yet she had no intention of that at all. Like she was just like, I was frustrated too that I kept asking the kids. And so how can we help the kids when we ask them to do that thing, be more responsive, right? To be more cooperative rather than slow balling it and taking all day to do that. So then we were able to like, okay, let's have a family meeting about that. And I was able to tell the kids this, hey kids, today, you know what was happening in me? I felt like I had to be bad cop and mom was being good cop. And like the kids were like, what? What is that? We have to like unload all this. And it was really neat to see this part of my childhood that we just never really talked about. And this moment of conflict gave me an opportunity to reveal this to her and for her to better understand lots of the past 15 years, how I've reacted in an upset way when I thought I had to be bad cop. And like her saying, I don't want you to be bad cop. I don't think anybody needs to be good cop. Nobody needs bad cop. Let's both just be on the same team to helping our kids in that moment be able to be cooperative with what we're asking.
I think that's a really interesting illustration of a point that maybe we're dancing around a little bit here, which is like sometimes the things that we infer other people are thinking are totally not true. And
Mm-hmm.
that can be with our partner in life, it can be with our kids, it can
Yes.
be with our business partners or our employees or people in our community. And I think like unpacking, I love what you guys did together there is like unpacking what the projection might be
Yep.
instead of inferring that this person is feeling that way. And it only comes through that conversation. So I think the idea as well here that conflict is an opportunity, it might be a small one, but it's a chance for kind of reflection and deeper understanding. I think that's a really excellent illustration of that, you guys.
And Alyson, that becomes a family value that we will
Yeah.
always, when we have these types of conflicts, us with the kids with us, like this is a big problem in a lot of families we work with. They do not do that follow up. They do not go back, what I call watch the game film. They don't go back and watch the game film. They don't go back
Totally.
to the kids don't want to do it because they think it's going to turn into some kind of lecture.
Yeah.
The kids think the mom and dad are just going to shame them or get mad at them. The parents think the goal is to get the kid to change as opposed to using those conflicts as opportunities to come back around and just understand the other, to better understand that the whole conflict wasn't even what happened. It was the projection and the perception of what I thought was happening. Right. And then once we're able to undo that, I'm telling you, we were on vacation in California just a couple months ago. And although there were some great highlights, we went to Disneyland, we went to Yosemite, we did all these really cool things. But the biggest highlight for Sara and I, part of that trip, at least one of them, was after a big blow up where I got upset about something and I lost my cool. And in the drive from Los Angeles to Fresno, about a 3-hour drive, 4-hour drive, we had this super deep talk where our 8-year-old, our 12-year-old, our 15-year-old were sharing each of their perceptions over what happened. Each of them was heard. We held each of them instead of like get defensive. And it was really neat to hear each of them like grow closer to us and to each other through this unfortunate event. That it wasn't like, I'm like, yay, I'm glad I got really mad. But it's also like, that's going to happen. The goal is not to never have those. It's healthy families know what to do with those moments. It's not that they never have those moments.
I say that all the time when I talk with companies about how they operate. So I have a 7-year operations consultancy, and we talk all the time about how small business operations don't need to be covered in red tape, because if great businesses are growing fast, they're constantly breaking things, like always. And so operations need to be set up around how do we rebound and how do we repair from the things that we break. And I think that's kind of what you guys are doing. You're kind of giving that backboard, if you will, where like stuff doesn't fall through the cracks, right? We don't forget to revisit these types of conversations because there's like a baseline system and set of core values that we all operate from. And I think that's really lovely. Like, I'm sure there's lots of fruitful conversations, and you guys know for sure that you're not going to have a scenario where you haven't like meaningfully connected with one another or meaningfully connected with one of your kids over a long period of time. I'm curious, you guys, how do you guys continue to carve out space for the two of you in the hectic seasons of, I mean, we're coming up on the holidays. It's been lots and lots of things going on. Y'all were just sharing me about Sara's really hectic schedule today before we pressed record. But like, how do you guys carve out some time for some of those meaningful conversations? Because I'm sure if some parents, are listening here, they're probably like, oh man, I would love to do that. But like, I'm constantly driving kids from basketball to soccer to school and to all the friends' houses and all the stuff. So what do you guys do to maintain that consistency?
For us, the time that we found best, we've even tried weekly to have a bigger meeting, and that
it was so hard
family get together, you travel, people are in town,
I know,
or the soccer game gets scheduled right during that hour.
Yep.
So for us, it's that night, because we're both, for our schedules, even though he works evenings or I might be, at the end of the day, we both land at our house, right?
That's right.
So we do it every day. It's very rare. It's very rare. Even if one of us is out of town, we still call. And so these aren't hour long. Sometimes they are.
They can be.
But we make it intentional, even if we're going to put a pin in it and say, we need to come back to this later. We make sure we check in. And that keeps us connected, and that keeps anything that needs to be brought to the table. That's that chance to say, okay, here, let's talk about this, or let me inform you this thing happened with the kids. And so for us, I think it's that finding that time. And then even if it's 5 minutes, we're going to check in. And we hold ourselves to that.
And we're just like any couple, Alyson. We've got shows we like to watch. So there is this time, like on some nights I work, I'm coaching parents till 9:00 at night, right? And so I'll come home and my mind is thinking I'd like to just relax on the couch and watch the show and go to sleep, right? You can get in that mindset, but I'm not going to start that show until I say, hey, how was your day? What went on today? And that is a habit we got into back when our kids were your kids' ages. And what the reason why we found that so valuable, Alyson, and why we've intentionally made that so important is because when they were your kids' ages, my daughter Abby, the 15-year-old, I mean, she would have these, we were still working through this. We were still trying to figure out what does this look like to succeed with this new model of parenting we want to do, where we're actually not going to use fear the way our parents had done. We're actually going to equip our kids, disciple them, give them the skills. Like this was a whole new thing we were doing. Just like I think in a good business, you'd want to have a daily meeting about, are we staying true to this thing that we asked? Or when we got off the rails, how do we get back on? And so what that looked like, some of my most beautiful memories with Abby was like that night when I came home from work, Sara saying, hey, this and this happened with Abby. Could you follow up with her tomorrow? And then I would say, yeah. And Abby was always an early riser. So Abby was always up by 5 or 5:30 at the latest. And so I started just embracing that. Like I was like, you know what? If we're going to get up early, I'm going to love getting up early. So I still today get up at like 5 every day without an alarm clock. I just get up. And so Abby would wake up and I would say, hey, do you want to go see the sunrise with me? And we just go outside, sit in a camping chair together. She was maybe like 4, 5 years old. And I would just say, hey, mom was telling me something about what happened last night. Could you tell me what happened? And then I just listen to her heart. And like, she'd tell me, and then she'd start to be like, and I know I didn't mean to do this. I get that, honey. I just wanted to hear about it. Right. And that's when I got the hug. And that's when she started getting comfortable, where like the follow-ups about that negative event that happened the night before was during a sunrise on a beautiful morning, right? In her dad's lap, and us just talking about it. And that's when I was like, this is what I want our family to be about. That when we mess up, whether in our marriage or in our parenting, that we know there's somebody with open arms that just wants to sit and understand. And through that process, what you literally are doing, Alyson, is you're literally wiring the kid's brain and your brain to get in this habit of self-reflection, get in this discipline of every moment is an opportunity to reflect. And therefore, when I reflect, to become more aware, when I become more aware, actually be more empowered to create a different type of event. Right? That's how we change these dysfunctional dances in our family, these toxic things that go on. We change them by being unafraid to come back, look at the game film together, learn from it, grow from it.
That's super powerful. There's so much there. Opening up the conversation to just listen and understand and not be judgmental and not try to improve, I think is a useful tool for anybody in any relationship. I also love the timing. You wake up and you have a new day to like change or be understood or whatever that looked like for your daughter's specific behavior. I think we could all use that time to like reflect and think about what happened the day before and decide to rewrite the story in a way that feels more aligned with how we want to be and who we want to be. So I love that you guys gave that opportunity to your daughter, because it seems like a great rubric for, I mean, anybody.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we were doing at night in those conversations at night, was a similar type thing. It's just like the morning was more about getting ready to start the day with the kids, and they were up so early, and we'd be like, hey, let's table this till tonight. And then we'd make sure we came around that evening.
We had to find our time. And I think a lot of it is just the way mistakes, it was important for us to view mistakes as not something to be avoided, something to criticize, something to judge, but a place of that's where growth and learning happens. So of course, I make mistakes. He makes mistakes. Our kids make mistakes. And let's come together and let's see what we can, let's look at that, right? Because the best inventions, all of that stuff comes from mistakes or it going wrong. And then you can grow and you can do something. So embracing that's not something to be avoided or hidden or be full of shame, but something that we can now look at and talk about. And that's okay.
And that's the biggest like barrier to growth, is the shame of messing up, the shame of failure. And so we wanted to, in our dream was, we want a family that's okay with failing, a family that's okay with messing up, because we're not going to let shame isolate us or keep us hidden from each other. We always want our kids to know we want to see them and we want them to see us. And what that means is to have your door open to us, have your heart open to us, because we are not coming to shame you or to like pile on. I think that was a big kind of value that we wanted to like cement, was shame is not going to be welcome here. We're going to do everything we can to be able to invite them to us after these moments, knowing as counselors that shame is this huge hindrance to growth and taking personal responsibility. We really want to make sure we're not doing that in our marriage. And if we do, man, there was a time just recently, our oven broke. To be honest with you, our oven broke. It did this self-locking feature. It was burning this casserole Sara was making. And immediately my mind went to this place of judgment. Like, it was like so silly. Like, what did Sara do? Why did Sara lock the oven? It was just so dumb. And it was like a total malfunction. So then I'm yelling for Sara, and Sara comes in and I'm mad. And Sarah's like, I can't think when you're upset like this. And then I'm feeling like, are you blaming me for being upset about this? But what we did in our family kind of get together that evening was, in just front of the whole family, I got to reveal that process to the kids. I'm like, kids, you know why I was so upset today? Because I actually think your mom is super smart. And I actually think your mom can fix it. And yet then my own anger was making it more difficult for mom to do it. And I was like, how am I doing this to myself? And so I said to the kids, I want you to hear this. Sara, will you forgive me for how I spoke to you today? There's no need for you to be talked to that way. And she did. And I said to the kids, that had nothing to do with mom. That was my own internal judgment. I had all these scripts in my mind that somehow she should have known it was burning. Like somehow she should have been aware of this. And it was just crazy. But it's probably what my dad would have done with my mom. And that's why I was reenacting something from my childhood. And I was able now to write a different script in the kids' mind. So they go, oh, dad knows that had nothing to do with mom. That's silly. It was all just a mistake with the oven.
You guys, honestly, these tools and these stories are so useful, and I'm sure universally experienced by a lot of parents listening to this episode. I think you guys bring humanity to relationship building. I know you guys, you're both very clearly experts, and I think also being willing to pull the curtain back and show the folks that you help that you guys are going through the same things and you're also learning and growing. I think that's a really beautiful place to come from where you've got some things that have worked for you. And also you're like still in the foxhole with families, right? You guys are
Yeah.
still very much still
Yep.
figuring things out. Tell me about 25. What's exciting? Where are you guys really looking to leverage more of your time and your family's time? And I want to give folks more Kyle and Sara. So where can listeners get in touch with
Yeah.
y'all if they're experiencing some of these things in their own family, or if they're like, hey, listen, I need one of these tools in my toolbox, but like my spouse kind of just won't come around to like
Yep.
unpacking their own stories. And like, I want to be able to help them with that. What can we do? How can we get in touch with y'all?
We do our podcast and I don't remember how far, 2 years into that?
Yeah. 3 years.
Yeah,
3 years
3
into our
years?
podcast.
Wow.
Yeah. Mhm.
Time flies. So for 25, we're always reevaluating. We want to bring our kids into it, and
Yeah.
we're always trying to figure out resources that we can make. We just recently made one that helps you unpack as a couple, because I think we've been down that road
Yeah.
of trying to come together, and we meet lots of couples who do. So we've created this little small workbook or PDF
Yep.
that people can get and sit down, plan it, make it fun,
Yep.
but sit down and go through it to open up and unpack things and to help couples come together. Cause I think you're just two different humans, and that's an important step. So we're going to sit down and figure out what else can we create? What tools can we make available to people?
Yeah. And so they definitely can find that. We'll provide that link to you, Alyson, for them to get that. It's a parenting together kind of worksheet that they can sit down as a couple and work through that. And we're basically just giving them the steps that helped us get where we're at today. But we'd love for them to check out the
Amazing.
podcast. On the podcast, they will hear a different type of podcast, right? There will be some interviews, similar like what we're doing with you right now, but there's a lot of just us going through it with our kids and learning from other people's mistakes, from our own mistakes. So we actually started the podcast because I wanted to create a conflict. I wanted Sara to be able to get on a microphone and share her wisdom. And because mostly my voice was the one being heard. And so they'll hear us talking. Well, what our approach that we use is really a parent first approach, meaning that change always begins with us.
Yeah.
So any kind of conflict I'm having in my family or with our kid, it's an opportunity for us to come together as a couple and say, what is it we're trying to achieve here? How are we helping the kids and supporting the kids to do that?
Really
right?
empowering the parents with the tools that we have found are so invaluable. I'm so grateful for what I've learned on my path and journey working with families and doing this for so long. So it's sort of hey, let's share this with the other parents, because I think they would love it and they can take it to their families and to their children.
So there's so much info there. Of course, they can go to our website. Our website is artofraisinghumans.com. And we have very active social media sites on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. But I would say one last thing. If there are couples who are saying, man, I've read some books. I want to change what we're doing. We do want to do it different and better than our parents did. We really do want to move away from fear-based techniques and approaches, but we just don't know how to do it. I'll tell you what, we didn't either. And the way we did it, we got connected some really smart coaches who helped us be able to imagine a different type of parenting, where you're actually raising kids who are self-controlled rather than you controlling them. Raise kids who are actually self-disciplined, who know who they are, and they know how to show up in any given circumstance or situation. So that's what we're passionate about doing, is helping parents be able to do that. So if they want to know how to do that, they can email me at kyle@artofraisinghumans.com, and they can just tell me they're interested in setting up a Zoom call with me. And I'd love to set up a short Zoom call, tell them how we do it and how we could possibly help them.
Amazing. You guys, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing the stories, for sharing the frameworks and the wisdom that you guys have gone through. I think that a lot of families listening may be a little challenged, which is always a good thing, but always, I think, leaving feeling inspired to implement some of these incredible things with their family. So thank you both so much for joining me today. This was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Alyson. Appreciate it.